I'm Jackie Carter. I'm a professor in statistical literacy and the academic lead for disability inclusion at the University of Manchester. I live with a disability and a long-term condition and often describe myself as deaf, dizzy and disabled. Here's a fact, or two. 24% of the working age population in the UK has a disability. 80% of disabilities are hidden or invisible, as are mine. I started the Let's Talk Disability podcast series to provide a platform to raise awareness of what it means to be a disability inclusive university. The podcast is a series of conversations which I host on the lived and living experience of our colleagues and postgraduate students of being disabled or having a long-term condition. On each episode, I host two guests. One is a senior leader at the university, a person with influence and responsibility. The other is a member of staff or postgraduate student who is open to sharing their disability or long-term condition. The aim is to demystify what being disabled means and create a culture of sharing. But, and this is important, each episode moves from dialogue to deeds, from talking to action. The senior leader is invited to commit to just one thing, an action they will take away as a result of the conversation. The disabled guest gets to say what one thing would make the difference to their lived experience as a colleague or a student at the university. So let's dive in and find out what today's guests want to share and what they will commit to make our university more disability inclusive. Hello and welcome to episode 5, I think we're on, of series 2 of Let's Talk Disability. I'm Jackie Carter. I'm the academic lead for disability inclusion at the University of Manchester. And today in this quite hot podcasting recording studio, I have two wonderful guests who I'm really looking forward to seeing how the conversation unfolds. We've already been chatting. I think we've got some really interesting points in store. So I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves in a fairly short introduction because we've got so much to cover. Imran, can I start with you, please?
Hello there. So my name's Imran. I work for the University of Manchester and I'm also a GP. And I have a very obvious physical disability and I walk with 2 crutches.
Imran, how did you and I meet?
So I did a podcast, which was a 3-part podcast to promote and make people aware of different views on how people may view their disability. I think the key aspect of it was that just because I have a very obvious physical disability, what I don't like is people always approaching me with the assumption that I've had an accident, something's happened, wanting to know my confidential medical records. So it's a conversation which is quite heavy really when you have it repeatedly, and I was having patients do it. So, and I appreciate that I probably wasn't the only person in this situation. Probably other people with disabilities do have this. So the podcast called The Journey of a Doctor with a Disability. Part 1 is myself and a wonderful medical student at the time who is now a doctor. We spoke about our disabilities before university, during university and after university, and the how our experience has been with our disability, and you were made aware of that podcast, and then we've just been in touch to do things together. Well, mainly you're doing things and I'm joining you on the journey.
No, we are definitely in it together. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. Thank you very much. Thanks for sharing your podcast. And Rachel, if you could do the same, if you could introduce yourself and then maybe say how you and I met.
Hello. Yes, I'm Rachel Lindley. I am a GP, the same as Imran. But I'm here at the university as co-lead for service learning in the Faculty of Biology, Medicine and Health. I used to sort of facilitate the work of the community-based medical education team in the MBCHB, which is the medical programme trying to grow people to be doctors.
Great.
How did we meet? I don't know, Jackie.
Well, you and I are in the same circles, aren't we?
We're in the same circles. So I think some of it is around me wanting to design really good quality experiential learning that has impact and benefit. So our students get to feel like they're making a difference throughout their courses, and our communities, local, global, get some benefit from all our students' work. And I suppose my vision for that is, how do we do it, and how can we make it, EDI inclusive and allow everybody to have these brilliant learning experiences.
Oh, wonderful. And we're all in this together, really. So, in terms of disability inclusion, EDI, across all the protected characteristics, also experiential learning, you mentioned there, service learning, which is a big theme as the university moves forward for its 2035 agenda under the leadership of Duncan Iverson. So I think there's lots of points of overlap. But let's come back to the medical education part of this, because, we've not had people from your part of the university on before. We've not had people who span sectors, who do two roles. And I think there's something really special I'd like to sort of elicit from this conversation. So, over to you both. How can we pick that up?
I suppose for me, I was going to say around, the more I've grown in my career, the more I'm like, just hate the medical model of disability. Like, I'm really raging against it now, because it just doesn't work, and it's really harmful in so many ways. And so, but it's so entrenched in so much of what we do, and it's trying to work with people to unpack it and the assumptions behind it.
Can you unpack that for the listeners, maybe Rachel? As a medical trained professional, what does it mean to have a medical model of disability?
So the medical model is that all the problems are in the person, really, and that's their issues and their problems, and they've got to figure out how they're going to survive, and their disability is within them, as opposed to the social model being that it's how you can succeed if your world is adapted to allow you to succeed, and that the disability is in that space between you and the world, as opposed to it's just in you and it's all your problems and you're the flawed being, as opposed to society being the flawed being that needs to adapt. That's how I would see it. You tell me what you think, Imran.
Yeah. Excuse me. So I've been doing a lot of work with one of our colleagues, and our focus has been on neurodivergence, and I think that is a big topic with the medical and social model, where it's a case of, and there's so many people who are coming out now with having a diagnosis, I air quote on a podcast. And it's one of them where they are seeing as a problem. And there's so many stories that, our students are saying and things like that, where it's saying the world is designed for the neurotypical. Whereas the reality is, we're not focusing on strengths of the other people. So for me specifically, my main issue is obviously mobility. Yeah. And I think this job has made me highlight how I work as well. And actually what I need to function well. And I think that's like that with everyone. It's all those human factors that you think about that help. So, for example, you think, going through medical school, there's always someone who's had, a consultant shout at them or, belittle them, and then very early on, and that's kind of knock their confidence. And, further on from that, it means that they don't participate as well. Yeah. And I think that's always, especially if you're, these kind of scenarios that you have in your life judge how things go in the future as well. And I think if you have a disability as well, then that's further amplified as well, where you're thinking the anxiety that it creates. So simple things for me is I plan everything sort of, if I have to do some form of teaching, for example, I will, and the start time's at 9, I will get there for 8 o'clock, just because the amount of time it takes me to walk, if I can't find parking, if I, the room, what floor it's on, what's the access like, if there's no lifts, if I have to climb stairs. And then on top of that, which can take, a simple what would deemed on Google a 5-minute walk, for me, it's not a 5-minute walk. It's a reality 25-minute walk, because I have the amount of times I have to stop because my hands hurt from the crutches. So it's all this planning, and I'm probably not the only person with a disability who has to really plan these what would be deemed as little things to help me work, and then it's then having to kind of get myself back into a state where I'm ready to teach because I'm not in pain, because of my hands, my back, my legs, whatever it is. I'm now prepared to be at my optimal level, to help students, to help patients, whatever it might be. So there's all these factors, and that's just me, and I'm pretty certain a lot of people are doing that, and that goes back to this social model of, if things were made easier and we're not seen as problems, that, or the expectation is for the able-bodied person, or the neurotypical person, this is a set design, everything else outside of that is a problem, and it's therefore your responsibility to be in line with everyone else.
Yeah, if we designed inclusively, then it benefits everybody.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because it is less work for you to have to negotiate, and you can rely on things that are going to be there by design, as opposed to being unsure and thinking I've got to add another hour into my day.
Thank you for sharing that, because one of the things that is coming out of these episodes is the lack of awareness of people who have never even had to think about that before, simply because it doesn't impact their everyday experience. And I remember you and I on the training course that maybe we talk about in a minute, the leadership training course at the university for disabled staff and postgraduate researchers. I remember meeting you outside a building, in a building, where it was a Nancy Rothwell building, where there was a room that had been deemed accessible. And actually, it had come up on the university system as an accessible room. We have this app called Accessable. But the trajectory, the pathway from the entrance of the building to the room, which was in the middle of a very large building on several floors up, that was very difficult to find signage-wise, it just had hidden that real experience of how much effort it took to get into that room. So I think there's something really important here about not just making assumptions because of a pinprick on a map or something, but actually going and experiencing for yourself how to navigate, in your care where there are mobility issues.
I do appreciate from my end that this is stuff I probably need to vocalise, and I think growing up, there's a cultural element to it. So there's the disability SAT meeting that you chair.
SAT being the self-assessment team that we have for the Disability Confident group. That's fine.
Yeah. So, and one thing that I've been made aware of, and I kind of knew myself as well, is that culturally, me being of an Asian background, is that we don't vocalise our disabilities, our the issues that we're having very well. And I've grown up with keeping my issues to myself, and my parents were always saying your problems are private, and actually you can they felt that I had the ability to be just as good as the able-bodied person, and it's one of them where with our community, with the Asian background, so I'm Muslim, and in a Muslim community, we were very everyone is always asking sort of things, and my parents don't want to have that conversation over and over again. What's going on with him? What's his disability? And I don't want to share that disability. So that's how I've grown up. And I think a lot of I was just seeing some of the students that I've been involved with. I think they have those with an Asian background. I've noticed that when they do have health problems, some of them have the same, I can see traits of myself in them where they don't feel comfortable opening up. They don't want to normalize it in a way, because they've been told that this is a problem, whether that's from their family, whether that's from the systems that they're growing up in, which has been quite challenging for them.
Gosh, Rachel, where do you take that? How does that play back into the social model that you were talking about in terms of medical education?
Yeah, I suppose in medical education, crikey, that's a big one, Jackie. But I think it's hard because for me, like, there's lots of things popping in my head about that. And it's like, everyone lives their own life, don't they? And you're like, this is my life. And we all come at it with our narratives from our families as well. And as you get older, you realise, that what is me and what is the narratives that I've been given from my upbringing or the important people in my life. And so I suppose what I was thinking about when you were talking about that was I was thinking, oh, wow, because I grew up in a family whereby, lots of people would say, well, my nan was blind, my step auntie had a very severe genetic disability from birth. And I've done lots of volunteering things where we've got people who want to go sailing, like tall ship sailing, up to the top of Crow's Nest, or we've done holidays, or we've gone clubbing with people on ventilators who, are quite immobile and taking them downstairs. And so I've sort of worked in a world more where it's like, yeah, this is you, and you more like very activist model where they're like, this is me, my voice is not your voice, and I'm going to speak really loudly, you need to shut up, non-person that someone that doesn't have my experience. So I've probably internalized a bit of going, oh, well, I know I don't have your voice, you have to speak, come on, speak. Tell me what you think, in a very different way, probably a bit more like Scousey, Liverpool, bossy, Rach way, of going, I haven't got a clue. You just tell me because we're going to go wrong. So it's coming from it from a really different angle as well.
Yeah.
And sort of wondering and trying to get people to go like, this is what I want.
Yeah, and I guess that's the point where we were talking about this building issue, where probably the feedback that they've had is that this is okay. Because that's all they've known. Maybe it's not been revisited in a while.
Yeah.
Whereas it might be okay for those set of people, but for others,
yes.
Obviously you were kind of stalking me that day, weren't you? Following me.
Thanks, Imran.
In a nice way. In a nice way, I'm sure.
Where was I thinking I was being a supportive colleague?
But I guess it comes back to that co-production and co-design and by design, as we were saying, and that if you don't have the right people in that room that have that lived experience, they cannot say, look, this is utterly ridiculous. Yes, you've ticked the box, but it's really just annoying everybody who might be able to take advantage of that. And so
can we pick that up?
Yes.
You've just both touched on something that intersects and overlaps, and it's really important. It's being in the room and it's having a voice. Okay, so, and it's about leadership. Okay, all of this is about, there are people who are more vocal than others, are disability inclusion advocates, but in a broader EDI space. What are your thoughts? I've got you both here today. What are your thoughts about how, we are where we are at the University of Manchester, in a 200-year-old university that isn't particularly accessible in many cases, but we are at a really exciting juncture where our new Vice-Chancellor is coming in and talking about inclusive by design for the future. What can we do as disabled people, as leaders, as people in education spaces and elsewhere, to really raise the profile of inclusion for all? And, designing for disability, therefore it's inclusive for all. What can we do? What can you do in this space?
So, just a bit about my role, which will come on to then this leadership stuff. So my role, I work for the CBME team, which is having a refresh.
And it stands for...
community-based... I need to stop with the acronyms.
That's okay.
Community-based medical education. So it's basically a group of... with our focus is on primary care teaching within the university. So that was the main reason why we've been employed. And then we have other roles within the university. So my role initially was focusing on simulation stuff. And one of the projects that I'm leading on, with some encouragement from Rachel, was to try and get diverse simulated patients into our university. So I think doing the podcast and then obviously meeting yourself, Jackie, have become surrounded with people who would say they have disabilities. And I think I've never really been in that sort of position before, because as a GP, the majority of GPs are able-bodied. I'm not aware of many that share diagnoses, whether that be mental health stuff. That, we don't tend to have that chat too much. And so it's, other than physical disabilities that you can see, whether that could be, limb issues or mobility issues or visual impairments, whatever it might be. So I've always been, to my knowledge, surrounded by people who I thought were able-bodied. So I think then being my perception of people with disabilities before was, and I think because I do GP, where a lot of the patients I'm seeing, it's about them and the struggles that they're having with their medical issue. So that's what I'm going off, and that's why I felt I wanted to kind of stay away from doing work which evolved around disability, because I spend so much time at my GP work, and it's quite hard. I know GPs get a lot of stick, but actually it is quite hard and it's quite draining that you're having to take on board a lot of people's problems to try and help them, when the reality is I probably can't do that much for quite a lot of people. Yes, we do try to help as much as we can, but I think because of how society is, that, the struggles that they may have, the very specific natures, it's very difficult for me to fix their problems all the time. So my assumption was always that I'm going to go to these disability meetings and it is going to be like counselling. So that's why I kind of wanted to stay away. And I remember the first meeting I had, and it did feel like that. And I think I thought, no, I'm going to persevere with it. And I think when I started to do more work around it, it kind of opened my eyes to things, really, to sort of how things are and how leadership is and things like that, really. So, and I think I've learned a lot, really. So that leadership course that we piloted, Jackie, the Results CIC, I think that was the first real time that I was surrounded with people who had disabilities from an educational point of view. And it was interesting because I've been surrounded by medics. So I said that quite aggressively. I do apologize.
That's okay. That's okay.
You smiled when you said
You
it.
did.
For
I
the
think
listener.
it was just the punchy hand might have given the.
So medics, not for you, Rachel. Surrounded by medics. I think it's always been, but having, people who are non-medical and hearing their views on it and hearing sort of what they have to go through. And educationally, it helped me so well, not just to think from my view, not just to think from the able-body's view, but to think of someone who has visual impairments, to have hearing impairments, then think, okay, what things do they need to make it, and things that I wouldn't have considered. So, for example, one of them was sort of how the sound projects in a room, something similar to that, which I would never have thought of if I'd never been in that. And actually, that kind of thing made me want to do more work, and for sort of people with disabilities, because I know that I'm quite confident in my personality, so I'm quite loud. So. That's where you're supposed to go, Rachel.
Sorry,
no, you're not.
sorry.
You're okay.
I was going to say you're very assertive.
I was thinking
and I like
clear.
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 So
That's what I was thinking.
and therefore I'm happy to have that voice to say and to help people, because that's what I've gone into medicine for, to help people. And that's what my parents always told me, that you have a disability, it's not going to affect you. You can be better than the able-bodied person, and you're there to help people. And that's why I've gone into medicine, because of them. And it's having this new knowledge and trying to be a leader in this role is what I'm attempting to do.
Thank you for sharing that so authentically and openly. I was in awe of everything you were saying there, because I was on the course and I saw the other people on the course who had both hidden and invisible and also non-invisible disabilities, and it was a real learning opportunity, I think, for all of us. Rachel, where does that bring us to, though, in terms of sort of leadership? Because what you've described there's a lot of work, energy that goes into doing everything you've described, and I know you've got some thoughts on that, so please share them.
Yeah, so I suppose me, like as the, what was the leader of that team, facilitator of everybody's success, perhaps. Like, I think for me, when I saw you coming into the team, you didn't have that construct of going, this is me and this is, I didn't get a sense of, you as a more of that activist change maker within the university. Obviously you're new, you're trying to figure this out, you've lived in this world where it's like you are the same. And I suppose me as a leadership role, I was like, Imran's not the same. Imran has got a really unique perspective on things that I need to hear, we need to hear, and we need to use his unique perspectives on the world, on medicine, to be able to bring that into the team to make our output as good as we can make it. And I suppose probably selfishly I'm like, what is the team doing? What are we doing? How can we make an inclusive team? You've got a voice and a perspective that we need to hear. And so for me as a leader, it's like the challenge is, how can I make a space and a team that allows you to have that voice? And I know we've probably had different views on that, and I've encouraged you is maybe the word I would use. You might at the time not have felt it very encouraging, or and that's fine, because I was like, you're trying to, I could see that you had a clear voice and you were confident in saying your voice, and I was probably in my head a bit confused, like, oh, this is a great voice, but the voice is not speaking the thing that I think you have the really unique perspective on, that I want to see this change. I want inclusive simulated patients. I want our simulated patients who are actors, who pretend to be patients, who act being different sorts of patients. They need to represent the population. And I appreciate there's lots of problems with reliability and validity and all these things, and good quality assessments and stuff. But I was like, oh, I can't fix this problem with my voice. And I was like, Imran's got a really clear voice, and you're not afraid of saying it, and you're like, this is ridiculous, calling a spade, which is useful. Like in some of these spaces where you're having conversations, you're like, look, we need to, as a leader, you're like, we need to be in this space over here. We're not there. This is where sector-wide, nationally, globally, this is where the movement is going. This is where we know we should be. How on earth are we going to get there? You try and make change yourself, and you're like, oh, my voice is not the right voice. I don't have the right words. I don't have the right ability to bring this change. And I'm like, we've got to get there as a team, because the university needs to get there. We all need to do it. We need doctors that are learning with really inclusive experiences, back to experiential learning. It's got to be very, there's got to be safe spaces, but you've really got to be able to have that safety of the push, the challenge of going, this is really difficult for you, but we're going to do it in a safer way, so that if you have to press a pause button, you can, because you're really being pushed to your limit, not just being kept in the safe space. So I was like, Imran, come on. Let's get this voice. Let's make your voice louder. Come on, what are we going to do?
Do you feel that's happened, Imran? Because I'm hearing sort of, on the one hand, you've got the voice, you've got the lived experience, you're committed, you're passionate about this. There's leadership work that needs to be done to get what you pointed over there, that we're not where we want to be yet. But there's still that tension to me, that conundrum, that the people who are representing the minoritized group, in this case disabled people, are doing the work. Is that work being recognised? Because I think that's something we really need to grapple with at the university. It's not just at the university, it's sector-wide. But, people in spaces of being minoritised for whatever characteristic are disproportionately affected because they're minoritized, but they're also doing a disproportionate amount of the work. So how do we grapple with that? How do we make it fairer, more just?
Yeah, I guess to come back straight away, while I can see you thinking.
Yeah, go on then.
I guess, because that is the thing, is in a leadership role, isn't it? Is going, that has got to be recognised, and that has got to be valued as much. It's got to be part of the core. It is part of the core goals of the university, and we've got to put our money where our mouth is, really, and say, yes, you can get promotion on these things. You can be recognised and validated with this work, so it's not hidden, invisible work, because it is fundamental to where we want to be. Yes, you might not have done a research paper because you haven't spent your time on that, but you've spent your time delivering amazing impact for all our students so that they're doing that. So I think it's, how can we go, yeah, here's your name, this is your role, let's really sing the praises of that work, because it's essential, not just, oh, it's invisible. Yes, it's the nice to do box. It's not, it's core.
Yeah, I think it's the internal battles that you have as well yourself, of you're trying to justify you are good enough, and you can, you do belong in sort of those kind of settings. And I think from the results here I see, and seeing everyone that was there, I think some of them were having that battle as well. I could see that they felt that actually they're spending so much time challenging to just work on an even playing field that their mindset probably isn't in a leadership place.
Yeah.
So I think when I came into this role, I think that one of the key things that I had was I never had a title. So everyone in our group had a title of saying they do this or they do that. I didn't really. So I was doing a lot of work which was at the time fair enough, it was a little bit disjointed. It was one project, another project, and these projects. And it's only sort of been the past year where it's been cemented, where I felt, okay, so these are my roles now. And I've got my title in simulation side. I guess obviously the disability side of the work I do is we still don't have that title. And I think having that title is really important, because it gives you that confidence to say, okay, so that's my role, that's what I do, and I am the voice of that person, rather than, and you have allocated time to do that role. Whereas at the moment, it's a lot of the work I'm doing is I'm leading to do these things from the disability aspect, but it's is anyone seeing that? Is it just like, okay, I'm just doing this for because I'm just doing it, because I'm, because I have a disability and therefore people know about me, but specifically there's nothing on my sort of title to say that this is your role from a disability aspect.
Yeah.
And I guess it's one of them where, yes, this change is happening, and I think that's one of my concerns, is that actually I've just spent the last year and a half coming to grips with doing work around disability, because I've grown up to say, you're to try and compete with everyone else, the able-bodied people, and actually put disability in the back of my mind. And as you say, in the medical model, it's a problem. And the past year and a bit, obviously having that conversation where you encouraged me to do more disability work, is now I'm focusing on actually how do I improve everything. And it's that mindset that I've switched to say, actually, I just need to accept I am disabled, rather than, sometimes I have to look in the mirror, which I can't look in the mirror because I see my disability. And I've said this on my podcast, I can't look at pictures of myself with crutches because I remember the days when I never used to have crutches. So it's those kind of things where I have to look at myself and actually just accept I do have a disability, I do struggle with life, and actually I'm probably not the only person who's struggling with life. I do voice things, but disability-wise, I've never voiced it. And I've always put it at the back, because I'm not in the role because of my disability. I'm in the role because, one, I'm a GP, two, educationally, I've gone through the stages of building my CV up. And that's what I wanted to be viewed on first.
Yeah.
So I think that's always been my mindset. But now the past year, I've, been encouraged to do more work with disability, and having that's where I'm now built all these skills up, learnt more about it, not just my disability, all different types of disabilities. And then for it to then not be recognised, it's just a little bit of a kick in the teeth, isn't it? So I think that's what I would love the university to say, actually, you know what, you would be a good advocate for this. You're doing a lot of work. You're meeting the right people. Carry on with that. It's valued, that work.
Yeah. I suppose, I guess it's making me think about like allyship, I suppose, as well. And like, yes, there's a thing that you have a unique voice and a, clear perspective on, which is helpful for everybody to help us do better. But it's not all your responsibility, it's everybody's responsibility, genuinely. And I guess there's the bit of there's obviously, I'm hearing like you're feeling that lack of clarity in that role, and that feeling of it's the university. And I guess the university is made up of people, isn't it? So who are these people? What are these structures that are saying, no, we can't give you that role? Like the university is made up of us and what we make of it. So how can those people that are in those decision-making positions say, yeah, this is where we want to go? And I suppose for me, it's around, I hear a clear leadership steer about we are going to be more inclusive, and we're like, you being here, Jackie, and us having this conversation is so powerful. But there's a gap in the middle around, and I guess, I don't know why, but for some people, their goals, what they're prioritising are other things that are not about, let's really make it genuinely inclusive, because that is not a thing that they see personally as perhaps a priority. And that then feeds down to you to feel, I don't feel valued, which is really, on what potentially that's the risk, isn't it? And actually, then I feel like I don't want to do this. Yeah, actually, that is one of the core things about what the university needs to be doing. So how can we get that messaging all the way through, the whole pie of, I keep using all these food analogies, the pie of what is the university, like it's there, like it's not just a crust, is it? It's like everybody, like you working in it, living in it, trying to succeed in it, and go, this is my voice and I'm going to add this, but the core of me is about simulation, and the academic rigor that I want to bring in my academic area of expertise is not about disability, because that is then feels very like we're going backwards again, in that it's you and you have to be the activist, and it's not. We need to hear you. We need to help you speak clearly. We need to listen from a place of calmness and really hear, and not be upset if you say things that upset us personally. We have to park our baggage and like work on that ourselves, but allow you to speak and allow us to hear and go, actually, what are you trying to say and what needs to happen? I suppose it's not necessarily easy, and some of the job is trying to help you go, come on, you're still great. Like, you are an amazing person and you are bringing so much. Don't let this thing that feels unnegotiable or unnavigable to get you a name and like a like time that is allocated. But those are things that we can feed back, and this is maybe the beauty of this podcast is around saying how can we get that, like this is and Manchester 35 may be a really good bit of that opportunity around, yes, we have these brilliant like core values and a lot of amazing work, but for the people coming in and trying to navigate the innovation, functionally the educational innovation, how are we navigating to deliver that innovation, which is hard. You're not going into a role, there's already a name, great, here's the job spec, blah, 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 great, you just slot in. It's not, it's like this really forging through spaces that don't exist, haven't existed. But how to do that without you being broken or leaving.
Yeah.
So I'm going to reflect on both of you, and this conversation is so rich, and we could just, talk for an hour on this alone. Okay. And for me, it comes down to what you use, a value word, feeling valued and recognised and rewarded. Because I think, reward doesn't have to be monetary. It can be through a title or an acknowledgement of the amount of advocacy you're doing in this space, or activism, whatever you want to call it. For me, there's something, though, more about this. And I'm thinking about this really hard at the moment, because I'm writing in a book where I've interviewed 30 women on their atypical routes through academia, or working in and with academia. And we haven't talked about role models today, but role models have come up before. And role models in the disability space is something that I'm sure we'd all sort of have an image in our heads. But I think it's more than being a role model. I think you're a torchbearer. And I come up with this idea of torchbearer for my book, because if that path hasn't been torched before, if there is no clear literally, if there is no clear path to go on, you're the person who's not only creating a path forward for yourself. And you've spoken really eloquently about the personal cost of that to you, about flipping the script in your own mind based on how you've been brought up and how you've perceived your success so far, and then how you're stepping into this disability inclusion space, and that's exposing you. That comes at personal cost. Not only are you doing that for yourself, but you're doing it for the people who can come after you, and all the people who are going to come through the medical education at Manchester and benefit from the immense effort that you've put personally into your own development, but also the development of the university. And for me, the reason I'm animated about this is because I think that does come at a huge expense. That has meant you expending your energy, coming in on your days off because you want to be the voice in the room, you want to be at those meetings. And I think the role of the leaders then, Rachel, is to recognise that and to put that on paper or somewhere digitally to say, well, this is what's happening behind the scenes. It's not hidden, it's real, it's tangible. It's hours of your life, it's your effort going to training courses in order to be able to create a better outcome, a more equal outcome for others in this space. And until we capture that, and I did spend 18 years working in business engagement, so I'm not a traditional academic, until we actually capture and put that down as a business model about how we need to enumerate and quantify that effort, I think we're still going to be sort of not making the progress we need to make to put the right allocation of resource to where we want to go. So I probably shouldn't have said all of that because that's not part of the conversation, but it does seem to me we've got a big piece of work to do here, and actually we've got a brilliant case study sitting across the table from you and I, Rachel, that we could just take and articulate what this took in terms of hours, whatever, in order to be able to get, and then all the recognition in terms of your work with me at the global university level, what you're doing outside of your division, your school. We have to sort of raise the profile of that because it's a model that others could follow.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think it was, I remember you just saying, email everyone. So
me, I said that.
You said that to me. Just
self-promotion.
Yeah, self-promotion, and I think
Absolutely.
that's what I did. And I was like, and I think I remember answering to was like, yeah, I'm doing that anyway. So, and it's just more to get your voice out there, which is really important, isn't it? To do those leadership stuff and have those qualities and get yourself in with the right people to impact change and make an impact in order to sort of make the system a bit better. I mean, we work in a building, Stopford building, which I was a student at Manchester Uni for a year in 2004. So I used to come to the Stopford building. It's barely changed. So, and I just think to myself, and the difficulty I have to every day going to that building is, it's not great. And I appreciate they're doing some work now to try and change it, but that's like 20 years in the making.
Hamid Haroon works in that building, doesn't he?
Yeah. I think
Hamid.
so. Yeah.
Hamid is a senior researcher. He's been on the podcast, and he's the co-chair of the National Association of Disabled Staff
Yes.
Networks. I think there's a continuation conversation to be had here, because I think we're probably going to have that conversation just at the right time.
Yeah.
Not in terms of changing the whole building, but in terms of sort of sharing some of the great work that's taken place.
But I guess what we don't want is another 20 years where we have to keep fighting to make the change.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that obviously it seems it's the kind of the go-to thing at the moment. I think there are a lot of characteristics, protected characteristics, that have been explored. I feel like disability and neurodivergence is kind of, in a weird way, next on the list, where people are focusing on that a lot, and are trying to become more aware of the impact it's having on the individual, and what can be done to help them be the best version of them.
Yeah.
So my hope is that the next few years it does improve, and we get better with it.
Is it the case that Manchester's still the largest medical school in the UK?
In Europe.
No?
In Europe.
In Europe?
Yeah, I think so.
In Europe, okay, even better. Okay, we've got high aspirations then, Rachel, haven't we? In terms of, we're going to have to move on. Sadly, I know we could talk for much longer. We've covered most of the main themes we said we set out to cover, and I'll ask you if there's any wrap up comments at the end. But this is a nice bit where I get you to each commit to an action that comes as a result of having this conversation, because talking's great, but actually it's actions that make the change, as we've been saying. You, Imran, first get to ask Rachel.
Oh gosh.
So you've got the question in front of you, if that helps. But
so the question is, what one thing will you commit to do as a result of this conversation?
I feel like I've got a lot to do.
You do, yeah, absolutely. But
there's always a lot to do. I know one thing.
One thing.
Well, before the podcast started, we did talk about self-care, and we did talk about the work that you were doing, and the extra work you were doing. And obviously this is like brilliant, but I guess I also have a guilty conscience in that I was like, come on, Imran, you'll be great in this space. Shove. Encouraged. Felt like a shove. And I guess I know that about the amount of work that is, and I know that we've got loads of sim work and related work to do as well. So I guess my commitment might be to your self-care and making sure you get your annual leave somehow, and we do something to think about meetings, which I know is not me, but it's about that is something that I've heard today from you, and I don't want you to like wear yourself out. Like I get like all the on one level I can understand like you've got the weight of this responsibility that I've placed a bit or encouraged you into that space of having that burden of responsibility and that work, and that isn't just your work, it's all our work, and that's a new space for you relatively, and you've had to like look at things slightly in a different way or view yourself differently and all these things, and that's a lot. And I guess it's just making sure that you do take your annual leave properly and work out how can we do that in a way that you still have your voice there and there isn't stuff happening without your voice. There's maybe a bit of like just a conversation about how that, I don't know, coaching type conversation about how do you advocate for that and making sure that those decisions are not happening without you, because you do need to be there. Like that's what I'm thinking about, but that's not a thing. That's the thing I'm going to do for you. But what am I going to do?
Well,
I guess I'm going to do that for you.
Is there anything I'm going to probe a little bit further? You've said your one thing, but I'm just going to ask a cheeky question about, given what we were talking about, roles, leadership, recognition, value, is there anything that you could take away as an action to progress that?
So I guess
I'm asking Rachel because she's and then
I suppose I'm thinking what you can.
Sorry to sound so aggressive. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Rachel. Rachel, that was an add-on question for you from me in terms of recognition of the work.
Yeah, I guess on one level, I can do that contacting of people to make sure they know what you're doing. I suppose I'm not in the role of leading that team anymore. I'm not really in that position to be able to, or in any of those meetings or conversations that I used to be in, to say, this is Imran and this is what he's doing. But I think, so I can do that. That's an easy, relatively, like, this is what you're doing, and try and work with you to make sure we've got a summary package of what that is. So that people can digest it in like their language. But I guess for me, thinking about what's in my control is the service learning element of it, and thinking about, if we're doing inclusion by design, how are we, because I haven't got to that stage really. Like, I know it's like a core value of that work, but how am I going to make sure that particularly that disability element of the EDI part within the experiential learning activities that we're designing do have that disability sensitivity within it, because that is what I can control and influence and stuff. So, because I've got an ethical type framework about, we need to think about what are we doing, what are the ethics around what we're doing with the community, with ourselves, with the work, but I haven't yet, I haven't gone, right, how are we going to design that? So maybe you can do that with me.
Brilliant.
Another bit of work.
No, but
you can steer me on
I
that.
would be interested in that as well, because Rachel and I are already in a working group, I can't remember what it's called, about experiential and service learning. So if one of the things that we could do is Pincer Movement come together and foreground inclusivity of anything that's designed through that group, and use you as a case study, for example, through the work that you've been doing to feed into that as an example, I think that would be a really practical way of building on this conversation. Do you agree?
I think.
And I would love to do that. And I guess it comes back to that being acknowledged for that work as a specific role title.
Maybe I'll quickly write a role now.
Thanks.
And then, share it, and then you're very invited to apply.
Bish bash bosh.
So, Imran, you asked your question, Rachel.
Over to you.
Me, I
what
guess
one thing would make a positive difference to your experience at the university?
What one thing would make a positive
One thing, it's hard, isn't it?
It's hard to your experience at the university.
You can dream big, Imran. You can knock the Stopford building down and rebuild it or something. It's up to you.
It would actually. I mean, I would happily do that. I think the planning of Stopford building is awful. So I park at the back of the Stopford building, and our meetings, as you know, are the other side of the building, and that building is massive. So we are first floor usually, and then our main meetings are committee room A and B. The double doors are horrendous.
Yes.
There's no chairs in those corridors for me to take a break. So I have to lean on bins, yellow bins that are there because my hands hurt. So it's those kind of things really. And I think one of the things which I've noticed is it's a difficult one, because I get both sides of the argument. It's hybrid meetings where some of the meetings that I attend, I wonder, could they be hybrid? I do get the value of face-to-face meetings. And then, but the flip side I have is the hybrid meeting would just be for me.
Yeah.
The
and
reality
then it singles you out.
Yeah, it singles me out.
And you miss out.
And then I miss out because I don't have the same conversations as in that. And that's kind of the battle I have really with these. If it's a hybrid meeting purely for me, it's not worth it. Whereas I feel like I kind of have to struggle to get in to do that. So the building itself would be great if we could just knock the building down, simple things. The doors being a little bit easier because there's like a billion double doors to get through, which are really heavy to push. Then, chairs, flip chairs, on walls that you could easily put in if, you are struggling, because it's quite a long corridor for me to take a little break.
Feels like that should be quite achievable.
Yeah, a little flip chair, like stuck onto the wall. If you're tired, folds up, comes down like a cinema chair.
Yeah, I've seen them at the bus stops.
Yeah, so I think there's stuff like that which would be very easy to then, when I do come in, it's like I don't have to do that walk in one go.
Yeah.
Well, my commitment to you both, you particularly, Imran, is to speak to John Ashley, who's the Director of Estates, who has been on this podcast, who is a fantastic advocate for disability inclusion, is not looking for projects, but always listening for where there is a need. And I'm going to take, when this is recorded and published, I'm going to take, in fact, even before it's published, I'm going to share it with John, with your blessing, and we'll see what we can do in that space. But you're right, singling people out because of their needs is not the approach we want to take. We want to make it inclusive by design, which is where I'm going to finish my comments today. Have you any further comments, either your quick comments that we didn't cover and you've got a burning desire to just say it before we go off air?
No, I think just so many more conversations to have.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Well, thank you both of you for
being
my guests. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's fired me up, and I can see both of you are quite fired up. So let's keep talking, but most importantly, let's keep making the change.
Marvellous.
Thank you
all.
Imran.
Thank you both.
Lovely to chat.
And Jackie.